amount of training. Now, I'm sure you know that's a common question we get. How much should I train? How much should I work out? And typically we recommend 3 days a week worth of resistance training or working with a trainer, though we do anything from 2 to 5. But how much is too much? Or where do you know when do you know that you have crossed the line? Well, I hate when we get to this point. I don't like to use this as measuring the line, but something that we need to be on the lookout for when we're working hard towards a goal is the danger of overuse injuries. Today on the Personalized Fitness Podcast. Good day and welcome to the Personalized Fitness Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personalized Fitness and your host for the Personalized Fitness Podcast, which is dedicated to enhancing your life by dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and nutrition. Now, before I get into our topic today, which is overuse injuries, let me tell you how to get in touch with the show. Because as usual, the best ideas for shows actually come from our listeners and our viewers. So I appreciate Tony. Thank you so much for sending the question in about overuse injuries. That's why we're going over this today. But if you have any questions about this show or any others, or you have any questions about dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness, please contact us at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at my email address, which is Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com, which of course is our website, personaledgefitness.com, and our Facebook page. Hit me up on Twitter at Team PE. If you so choose, and as always, thank you very much for the questions that we've gotten in the past. And on that note, and a program note, to let you know that we do have coming up next week, I have a program with Dr. Carolyn McGugan. Now we're talking this month is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and so we'll be discussing with her breast cancer and also exercise and how that helps you in dealing with breast cancer. So she'll be my guest for next week's show. And then the following week, we'll have Dr. William Terry back on with us to talk to us more about the Connexus Clinic. So be looking forward to those shows, and I hope you join us for those. Now, overuse injuries. You've probably heard that term. It's not unfamiliar. It's one that's thrown around quite a bit, and it happens a lot. In fact, overuse injuries happens in 30% of athletes, according to the National Strength and Conditioning Association, or I'm sorry, the Athletic Training Association. 30% of athletes suffer from overuse injuries. Well, as always, I like to start out with a definition. You've heard this term before, but let me tell you what the definition of an overuse injury is. It's injuries that are not caused by an acute event. Now, they generally occur from excessive mechanical loading or stress being placed on the tendon, bone, ligaments, and I will go ahead and say muscles also. So it's just as it sounds. It's over time. You know, these repetitive motions, repetitive movements, repetitive bad form will cause overuse injuries. Now, the reason I'm talking about it today and the reason I think it's part of the myths associated with health, fitness, and wellness is not so much in athletes. I don't think anybody is surprised to hear that a high school baseball player, a high school pitcher, ends up with an elbow problem or a shoulder problem when they've been pitching aggressively year-round in baseball from elementary school, or at least middle school, all the way through high school. And they've always been a pitcher, and they end up with an overuse injury. I don't think that's any kind of surprise to anybody. You hear about it in the collegiate ranks. You hear about it in the professional ranks. And even the vast majority of clients that we deal with, which are individuals that are looking for weight loss and just gaining some strength and actually extending their life, overuse injuries are extremely common. Now, one of the areas we see that overuse injuries are basically accepted, which I can't stand, and that is in endurance athletes, especially runners. Though we do see it in swimmers, we do see it in cyclists, but even in walkers. Overuse injuries is something very common, but it is very misunderstood. And I'll get into that in a minute because that's pretty well the crux of what I want to talk about today as far as overuse injuries is concerned. When it comes to athletes, I don't think that we're surprised about any of the information that I'm going to share. But with all of us that are trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle, overuse injuries are very misunderstood. And I'll get into that in a minute. Let's give you a little more background on that. Like I said, 30% of athletes are suffering from overuse injuries. And if you're interested, we typically see, according to the Journal of Athletic Training. Now, that's the publication put out by the National Athletic Training Association. Real quick, NATA is a fantastic organization. It's they have one of the 3 certifications that we prefer here at Personal Edge Fitness: ACSM, NSCA, and NATA. American College of Sport Medicine is one of the governing bodies. National Strength and Conditioning Association is another governing body. And when it comes to rehab, the governing body of athletic training is the National Athletic Training Association, which is a fantastic organization. And we have actually 2 BOC certified trainers on staff here at Personal Edge Fitness. And so that journal, according to them, 62% of overuse injuries occur in females. Now, I find that interesting, and I have quite a few ideas of why that is. But without going down that rabbit hole, let me tell you this: it's not a genetic thing. I promise you. If you look at the injuries that are occurring and where they're occurring, what sports they're occurring in, you're going to see a pattern, and the pattern does not have to do with gender. It has to do with the type of sports that they're doing, the type of training that's going on. It has nothing to do with the genetics of it all. The main reason I brought that up was the fact that that's going to go and speak also to the vast majority of overuse injuries that we experience here at Personal Edge that are mainly they're mainly with non-athletes. They're mainly with people that are just trying to get in shape. And I'll hang on to that misconception for a moment. I'll get back to it. In a minute. Overuse injuries they can be limiting, obviously. Now, let me give you an example real quick of an overuse injury that we see very common, and it's accepted. And that's in runners. As I've said many times before, endurance athletes, enthusiasts, I should say, because you may not think of yourself as an athlete because you don't go in competitions on a regular basis. But if you are a runner and you've been a runner for years and it's something that you really like, you really enjoy. In fact, if you think about it, you probably do it more for your head than you do for your body. Then you are a runner. You're an athlete. You're an athlete. I promise you. Cyclists are the same way. My particular area is swimming. I actually love to swim. Absolutely love to swim. And when I want to deal with stress, I'll hit the pool and do lap after lap after lap, which seems boring to a lot of people, I'm sure. But it's just that same type of, we've talked about runner's high before. That's the same type of feeling, that endorphin release that we do for our head, that makes us an endurance athlete, that makes us really love our sport. And the sad thing to me is how many individuals that come to me because they've had to stop running, and I'm using air quotes if you're not watching this on video, and they haven't stopped running because of their age, quote unquote. You know how I feel about that. It has nothing to do with time passing on a calendar. It has to do with repetitive motions, not training correctly. I like that. I was going to add another syllable in there in the middle of that word, but not training correctly. For instance, in runners, something we see on a too common a basis, especially in 2022, way too common a basis, is I run, that's my fitness. I don't do anything else. I don't do resistance training. I just run. And even worse than that is I don't need to do legs because I run, and running takes care of my legs. Nothing could be further from the truth. And what ends up happening is, in your running, you're using the muscles, therefore you're breaking down muscles, and you may or may not be taking in the right amount of protein or right amount of calories, and you may be expending those calories. Therefore, you think you're taking in the right amount of calories, but you're not, and you're actually getting into that quote-unquote thin runner's body where you're actually atrophying muscles. The muscles are there to protect the joints. You're also not doing resistance training when you're running, and you're neglecting large groups, the hips especially, and the hamstrings. And believe it or not, most people are surprised to hear this, you're really neglecting the quadriceps because you're breaking them down and you're not building them back. As you begin to actively deteriorate those muscles through this activity without trying to rebuild them, trying to do the right training for this particular sport, then as those muscles go away, the protection for your bones go away, or the muscle itself just weakens, and then you step off a curb or step into a pothole or something, nothing tragic, nothing that's going to twist an ankle, and boom, you pull a muscle, and you don't address it, and you keep running on it, or you take a little bit of time off, but it's still hurting, but I can run through it, so you start running again, and now you've got an overuse injury in the muscle. The one that we most commonly see, of course, is in the joints. We see overuse injuries due to running in the knee joints and the hip joints and the back, for that matter. And the typical response we get from athletes that have gone and sought some sort of medical advice for this is, well, I've been told to stop running because I am this number on the calendar and I can't run anymore. And it's just generally accepted that you can't do that because you're this number on the calendar. And it's nothing. There's nothing further from the truth. As I've said many times, the ridiculous concept that we deteriorate ourselves because time passes on a calendar is an absolute lie. Anybody telling you that is lying to you. Anybody saying that is an absolute liar. If they have any questions about that, my name is Garrett Williamson. You can reach me at 251-341-0927. On this show at 251-278-3343. I'm at 513 West I-65 Service Road North, Mobile, Alabama 36608. I'm there most days. Now, it is not time passing on a calendar causing it. It is repetitive mechanical motion without the correct ingredients. What I'm being training, but the ingredients you need to maintain those muscles, maintain those joints, maintain those areas that you are repetitively injuring. Swimmers, we see it in shoulders. Cyclists, we see it in hips, back, even knees with cyclists. And it's not just endurance athletes. We see this. We see this in CrossFitters. People doing high intensity interval training on a regular basis that keep going through these very complex movements. Most of it Olympic lifting, which I'm a huge fan of, but there's time associated with it. Therefore, we're going to fast through them. And though it can be done fast, though it can be done correctly, typically it's not. Typically, it hasn't been taught in the right way. Therefore, we're repetitively doing a deadlift wrong. We're repetitively squatting wrong. That's probably the one I see the most. It's amazing. I find somebody that's been working out for years, and they've been squatting wrong all their life. And then they end up with these injuries. So don't let it be a limiting factor. And I dare say, with taking the right course of action, I would say, don't let it stop you. Now, please, I hope you heard the first part of that. With the correct actions, don't let it stop you. And what I mean by that is you need to address it. You don't need to ignore it. You don't need to ignore it. You don't need to make up excuses for it. One of those excuses is, of course, age. The other one that I see that's very common, and I'm shocked to see it. I'm shocked. No, I'm shocked that it continues to go on. And that is that idea that, well, my body is this particular way, and my body, unlike any other human body out there, reacts this way to this lift, this mechanics, this exercise, and therefore I have to completely avoid that. Now, I don't want to step on your mother's toes, because she's right. You are special, but I promise you, the laws of anatomy and physiology that govern every other human body out there govern yours too. And as I like to say quite often, you're an individual, just like everybody else. Now, I know it may sound ridiculous that I'm saying that, but it is amazing how many times I have people tell me, no, my body can't conduct that exercise because my body operates under a different set of rules that no other body operates under. And nothing could be further from the truth. Now, you may be listening to this and saying, yes, Garrett, but I had this injury, and since I have this injury, now I have to be careful. That's a different situation. That's a different situation. And it could be an injury that you could rehab and get around, but it may be something permanent. I understand that. And therefore, that's going to modify your exercises. That's different. But this idea that, no, my body just operates this special way, I'm telling you, you're putting a limit on yourself. You're not putting a badge on your shirt. That's all you're doing is holding yourself back. So the best thing to do if you think that you've got an overuse injury, and one of the ways to tell if you have an overuse injury is understanding the difference between what I call good pain and bad pain. Now, there's soreness involved with training, and I've spoken about that several times. You know, and you've heard me say this several times, that we as personal trainers are just like physical therapists in that we're not growing anything. Yeah, I'll repeat that because it shocks everybody. It shocks people every time I say that. We're not trying to grow anything. We're trying to make something grow, but we're not actually growing something. We're breaking it down. We're breaking down muscle tissue just like a physical therapist is breaking down muscle tissue, telling your body, wrong, do it again, build it back stronger. And that repair process that you feel the next day is general soreness, and that soreness is the repair process. It's the white blood cells cleaning everything out and your body starting to build to put everything back together. And that's the soreness you feel. That's good soreness. That's good quote-unquote pain. The lactic acid release that you have at the end of a set, at the end of that 10th, 11th, 15th repetition, wherever you're headed, which is telling you, hey, maybe you got one more, but you probably need to stop. That's a good thing. That's a good pain because that actually is your body's response to the overload principle. And it's your body's letting you, it's burning your muscle, that lactic acid release, burning your muscle, sending a message to your brain saying, hey, buddy, cut it out. And so that's a good pain. But when you have that persistent nagging, whether it's in the joint, whether it's in a muscle, and it just doesn't seem to get better, and maybe it gets a little bit better, but 3 days later when you're ready to train the muscle again, it's still there, and it continues to happen, that's an overuse injury. That's something that needs to be addressed. It doesn't mean you have to stop. It just means let's catch it now before it becomes a real problem. Before an overuse injury becomes a joint replacement, before an overuse injury requires some sort of serious medical attention, and before an overuse injury eventually puts you out of a sport. Let's address it. Now, one way to avoid overuse injuries, let's talk about that. That's the best thing is that if you hear this podcast and when you just are able to prevent overuse injuries forever, that's fantastic. One of those ways is when you're increasing your load in your training, don't increase more than 8 to 10% per week. That's in increasing your running, increasing the speed, frequency, intensity, or time on any of your training, whether it's resistance training, endurance training, doesn't matter. Don't increase more than your load any more than 8 to 10%. And by the way, that's an overall 8 to 10%. If you're increasing your intensity by 8%, your frequency by 8%, and your intensity, frequency, intensity, and your time by 8%, well, now you've gone way off the scale. So overall, you want to increase your load no more than 8 to 10% a week. The good news is that if you handle it well, you're not causing any kind of undue bad pain, you can continue to do that every single week. I mean, at 10% level, within 10 weeks, you've increased 100%. So that rate is fantastic. Pay attention to your mechanics. This is extremely important. It's what we spend most of our time here at Personal Edge Fitness doing, is that analyzing your mechanics during your lift, during your running, during your endurance training. Watching not only mechanics, most important the mechanics are in the exercise itself, but also mechanics when it comes to putting together your workout. You know, conducting a really, really heavy leg day and then going on a 40-mile bike ride. Not a great idea. So that recipe and putting those parts together is very important. But the mechanics of the exercise themselves. These complicated lifts, especially Olympic lifting, are fantastic only when done correctly. This is why we're so adamant of getting teens and preteens in to see us prior to being thrown into a weight room with a coach, no offense to the coach, any coach out there, and to some of the fantastic weight room facilities we have in the even middle school and high schools out there, but they're not able to put the attention they need on each one of these athletes in order to make sure the mechanics are correct. That's why we encourage parents to come see us and take them through the LTAD that we've talked about with, you heard we do a podcast on that with Charlie Marlowe, long-term athletic development, taking them through those steps so they develop correctly. But you need to do the same thing. You need to pay attention to your mechanics in your fitness to make sure everything is correct. And if you notice some sort of undo, that just doesn't feel right in a lift, in a run, in some sort of exercise, hey, call us. You can contact me at 251-278-3343. We would love to sit down with you and analyze what's going on. Even if you don't work out with us, contact us. We'll do a session real quick and find out what's going on and be able to label it before you have a problem. You want to include sufficient rest. This is extremely important. And this is something that I have to tell you, as an athlete myself, I have done. In fact, I had, when my first world championship, I had 3 of my trainers working on my program. I gave them the responsibility of my program. And I had 2 of them sit down and look at my running, cycling, and my lifting that I was doing. And they broke it all down, and they wanted to look at the entire week. They wanted my entire menu as far as my workout was concerned, just like we do with our clients here. And he looked at it and said, "Where's your rest day, Garrett?" I didn't even have a rest day. Well, everybody needs somewhere between 7 and 10 days, in a 7 to 10 day training program. You need a rest day. And if you talk to my staff, who are in phenomenal shape, they'll tell you when their rest day is. They're doing that so they can recover. Also, rest and exercise. When you're actually conducting the program itself, if you're doing resistance training and you're doing a set, you need at minimum 30 seconds in between sets, working a muscle in order for the ATP, adenosine triphosphate. We just did a podcast on creatine, and we talked about that being the one additive that you can use as far as gasoline for the muscle, where the purest form of it is adenosine triphosphate, ATP, and it takes 25 to 30 seconds for that to fully restore into the muscle before you do another set or break it down again. So I've seen this stated before, and I agree with it. You can definitely rest too short, but you really can't rest too long. So a minimum of 30 seconds at least in when you're resting to recover. And also make sure you have that recovery day in there. I can't say enough about sleep. Everybody understands what quality sleep does. We did a podcast on it, but I'm telling you, quality sleep, that's when you're going to rebuild. That's when you're going to prevent these. You're going to, if with the right nutrition, you're going to rebuild those muscles and prevent these injuries from happening. Nutrition, I said that. I've got to bring that up again, and that is incredibly important. You know what I focus on there. First thing, there's no such thing as bad food. Anybody telling you that is absolutely lying to you. First thing that we want to be concerned with is calories, and the second thing we want to be concerned with is protein amount. Protein amount every meal, every day. Calories, you can do it through MyFitnessPal. You can easily figure out where you need to be. Make sure that you're eating enough, so that the protein will be effective. The overuse injuries that I see that are attributed with time in let's call ourselves average Joes, typically is related to creating a caloric deficit, first with nutrition, and then trying to create even more of a caloric deficit through exercise. Now, there's actually a term for that, and you may hear this term and think, I'm not that. Well, it can go so far as to be what we call exercise bulimic, and that is people that eat typically overeat or eat large amounts and then try to go exercise every bit of it off, or think with that kind of an idea. I had 600 calories for lunch, I'm going to go burn 600 calories. And that can lead to problems like exercise bulimia. But where I see it a lot, I see it in those clients of mine. I did a podcast on this recently. You know, this is a hot topic for me, and that is that are sarcopenic, that have sarcopenic obesity. They've gone and had their BMI tested, which is a complete waste of time. They are way underweight But according to their BMI, they're fantastic. But actually, there's a major imbalance in their muscle as far as their body fat, and mainly just a lack of muscle. Their body's not maintaining it because they've undereaten all their lives. And now, since their body's not able to maintain with enough calories and maintain the energy expenditure with calories, it'll start to pull calories and pull energy out of muscle, therefore degenerating the muscle. Therefore, they'll be doing simple body weight exercises. And now they've got a pain, they've got a problem. And it's because of overuse injuries due to undereating and continuing to exercise. The whole time they're trying to create a caloric deficit, which actually is causing them to gain more fat. Now, if you have any questions about that and that doesn't make any sense, please, more than welcome to contact me about it. You can also check out a podcast I did just 3 or 4 podcasts ago when I talked about sarcopenic obesity. And trust me, you can get fat by undereating, I'm telling you, and you can get into a vicious cycle of continuing to do that and therefore causing problems like overuse injuries. Now, I've done a lot of information. There's a ton of information on this. I could go on. I'm gone almost a half an hour here and could speak about this for hours. But if you have any questions about this, or you think you may be in danger of overuse injuries, or maybe I just confused you more than helped you, please feel free to contact me at 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach out to me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. That's, of course, our website and our Facebook page. Hit me up on Twitter at Team PE. There's absolutely no reason in 2022 that we should suffer from overuse injuries. We do our best here at Personal Edge Fitness to go out of our way to make sure we prevent those, not only on in our clients, but anybody contacting us, needing our guidance, using our expertise to avoid them. That's just one more way we help you sharpen your edge. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to speaking to you next week.